Hey everybody, this week we are discussing presentations. We're talking storytelling. We're talking some very interesting points when it comes to presentations. We're going to talk about the awkwardness that happens when there's too much text on your presentation, things that make people cringe when you are presenting and talking. We're going to talk about thoughts on pineapple on pizza. And most of all, we're going to have a ton of fun. So tune in. It's going to be fantastic. And we can't wait for you to get to meet our special guest. Oh, we're selling all the products and we're telling prospects what we got. Yeah, we're selling the next phase. We'll use lots of buzzwords. It's the next big craze. Jimmy and Rava show. Welcome to the sales stage. Sales stage. Hey everybody, welcome to the sales stage. Rava and I have a very special guest, which we'll get to. Want to recap the last episode if you guys haven't had a chance to check it out. We spoke with Ellie Twigger of Sales Loft. Just letting you guys in on what's not really a secret. She just won, and I read this on LinkedIn and I liked it. She just won SDR of the year with Sales Loft. Very well deserved. It was very evident that she's got the proper mindset. She has a great work ethic. The way she looks at business and has gained experience, wonderful job. And I know Rava, we connected after. Not enough nice things to say about Ellie. Very down to earth. Has some funny anecdotes in there. Made me uncomfortable talking about her favorite cocktail. But overall, great episode. We're going to try and one up that if we can even one up that. We've got a wonderful guest, and I'm going to let them intro themselves into the third person.
Because who do we have? We don't do any work. We really do minimal work, and so they're going to do it for us.
Delegate. Introduce yourself.
The wonderful Tori Taylor. Can you tell us who Tori is, Tori?
Perfect. Okay, Tori Taylor, what her friends would call probably a content deck wizard. I'm not sure how she feels about that, but the role that she just came from was pretty multifaceted. So to explain it simply, Tori worked in sales marketing in the group pension and benefits space, which usually has a snooze button that follows along with that. But ultimately what Tori's focus was various sales strategies for Manulife. So Manulife works in the B2B to B space because Manulife has consultants, advisors, and brokers, and then that group then sells to the client. So part of Tori's role was to be able to help build those sales strategies. But a really big focus for Tori was supporting account executives across Canada, about 250 account executives in their sales pitches. So that ranged from everything to the building of PowerPoints, prepping for them, and then any complementary materials like custom websites for clients or building out interactive learning modules. So that's Tori.
Tori sounds like a PowerPoint wizard.
A deck wizard.
Deck wizard.
Yeah.
No more sales deck disasters.
That's oh my gosh. That was a great, maybe Charlie can post the image of Jimmy's disaster decks.
That was a good
one. Well, actually, I have to give credit because actually Tori knows Jesse Aris. So Jesse was previously on our marketing team and would always comment about how pathetic our sales decks were. And then we would argue about who's responsible for the sales decks. And then he would make me post that every time they would give us like a new.
I thought you created that just for me, Jimmy. I was feeling pretty special.
We'll
actually
pretend I didn't hear that.
Yeah, we'll pretend that didn't happen. Charlie, he can just edit that out, no problem.
Charlie's an editing whiz. If Taylor or Tori, I've done that already. Do people do that to you?
All the time. I usually get Lori in emails, often Dory. You have no idea.
Only when they can't find you. Boom.
People that have first and last names that are both first names or can be first names
Yeah.
Very difficult for me too.
I had a meeting with someone twice and they just sent me an email saying, hi, Taylor. So
yeah, hi, Dave.
I met them twice already.
Oh man, okay, awesome. So we are going to be talking all about presentations, and I'm so excited for that because as a sales rep, you need something to feel good about when you're presenting a concept, whether that's demoing a concept or presenting pricing or a business case. Like when you don't feel confident in what you have, it kind of rocks your whole base. So, and especially for sales reps who maybe were used to going out in the field and presenting in person and having this rapport, and now we have to all present virtually. I think this is such a great topic to talk about. So I'm really excited to kind of dive into it. And so maybe we could start with just something really basic, but that I think is like a good place to start is like, what really makes a good presentation? What makes a good presentation?
So it's funny because the amount of times I've been asked that question, it's kind of the $1 million question, right? Like, how do I make a beautiful PowerPoint? How do I make it do everything that I want it to? And I think where I usually tell people to start when they first start thinking, I want a PowerPoint, I want to use a presentation to demo, to talk to my client, to use it for pricing, whatever it is. I always say to take a step back and remind yourself that you're actually the focal point and everything about the presentation should strictly be complimentary. And so I find often, and you kind of mentioned it, that sales reps, presenters build the deck to have that be the driver of everything. When the best presentations that probably most people have observed, and you can probably even think of some of the best presenters that you know, that slide deck, that presentation, whatever is with them is totally complimentary, and all it does is elevate that the presenter's game. So whether it's a couple words on a slide or whether it's just something you want somebody to remember, picture of my face, whatever it is, it's meant to just elevate the presenter's game. So what makes a really good presentation is the presenter reminding themselves as they're building it, this is just complementing what I'm going to verbally say or what I'm going to communicate to my audience. So that's pretty vague, but I generally find the most common kind of pitfall is that people rely so heavily on their deck first versus them in their presentation itself.
Yeah, I would think like, and I've seen some as well, as we already alluded to at the start, right, where a lot of it could be very text heavy, and I think a lot of whether it's reps or whoever's presenting relies on the cues that happen within the presentation.
Yeah.
And as it gets too word heavy, you're basically just reading what everyone else is just reading on the screen. And then it kind of takes away from the personality of what you're presenting, right?
Yeah.
From that perspective, like, and I've seen some really good presentations, like Tyler Lessard, obviously with us, he's one that, spends, I think what people often mix up is like someone like Tyler, who's incredible at presenting, thinks that he can just get up and present whatever the topic, and he can spitball with the best of them. But he also spends a lot of time doing it because that's what drives the confidence of him knowing what he did. And then for you, as someone who's spent a lot of time, critiquing, listening, helping to build presentations, what are some of the things that you see that make you cringe, or that you're like, oh, I don't want to see that, right?
Oh gosh, okay, you're gonna get me on a soapbox with this one, I think, because I could probably talk about pitfalls all day, but I think logically maybe I'll try to break it into a couple different buckets. The first one we just already talked about. Presenters use their slides as their speaking points and they overload it with information. And you kind of just alluded to it, Jimmy. Sometimes it is a comfort level thing. Presenters feel like they need to have those speaking points up there so that they can bang off all those points, or maybe it's because they want their audience to know there's so much good content on this topic. I really want them to be able to see all those bullets, when that actually has the complete opposite effect on an audience. So I always joked with people when I was critiquing presentations that we learn as kids ABC 1, 2, 3 for a reason. And the reason why we learn that is because we generally learn and digest things in threes. And so if you think about our society, even everything is threes. You'll like these ones, I think, Jimmy, maybe three periods in hockey, 3 strikes in baseball, 3 musketeers, 3 little pigs, 3 blind mice. 3 traffic lights, green, yellow, red, 3 pieces of silverware, spoon, fork, knife, right? Like we learn in threes, and the rule of threes in presentation, and where I'm going with this is, yes, we learn ABC 1, 2, 3 as a reason for kids, but the reason we do that is because our mind processes it as a pattern, and we remember patterns. So the reason we think about presentations when they get way too cluttered, anytime there's more than 3 points, what our brain does, and this is subconsciously when we were kids, what it does is it actually turns off your brain and it says, holy crap, Tori, way too much information. I can't digest this. And I'm trying to listen to the presenter. I got to pick one or the other. Like, what am I doing here? So it's very interesting because instead of putting 7 bullets, I find the most successful presentations are the ones with 3 bullets, and maybe each bullet is 5 words, because I'm able to then read, digest, and then redirect back to the focal point, which is the presenter. So that's usually the most common pitfall, is just like way too many points, like text heavy, busy, like there's a lot of competing priorities, and you don't really want to overcomplicate slides. And I always think of, I'm an analogy person, but I joke too about presentations. You want to think of a presentation as if you're walking into a museum. And I'm not a museum person, so this is probably the worst analogy for me ever. But you walk in and you see a painting or you see a sculpture, and that's cool. You look at it for 10 seconds, for me, maybe less. And then I immediately go to the story, right? And I go to the story because that story is going to tell me what the heck this sculpture is. And then once I hear the story and the narrative, I'm going to be like, that's sick. I could never do that. That's exactly how a presentation should be. A presentation should be an image, a couple words that allows the mind to be like, hey, Tori, tell me more about this now. I really want to engage with this, versus the opposite effect. If you read the story and then didn't see the sculpture, they wouldn't connect together. So I know it's kind of,
I think that's
interesting.
it's so interesting.
This reminds me of the limerick I wrote this morning at breakfast.
Well, I met with Tori earlier this week, and because I had a presentation and I wanted to I heard through the grapevine that Sean, for instance, had met with Tori, and I was like, I want to learn about presentations. And when you mentioned that analogy, it's so true that unless you are a expert in that sculpture or artist and you can deduce what it's about, then you don't need the story. But for the people that we're building these presentations for and talking to, they're not experts most often in this particular thing.
Yeah.
And so I love the idea of what you have on the slide you should be able to explain it, and that their brain shouldn't shut down just from looking at the slide. It should actually create a creative space in their mind to learn more about what you have to say.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because our conversation kind of went that way earlier this week too. When we get those busy slides, lots of content, even a lot of visuals too, right? It can be challenging for someone because, again, as a kid, we're used to seeing white space. Like white space, we love white space. And I always use, here's another analogy or story. Think about it as a kid, you see a white blank canvas. And on that white blank canvas, maybe there's one circle, for instance. So immediately, I guarantee you, everybody sees that circle and they're going to start thinking creatively. You want your audience to see that circle and have creative juices flowing. So where you're helping them is you become that teacher saying, okay, here's the circle. Now we're going to draw a circle on top and a circle on bottom. And then you're gonna be like, okay, 3 circles. And now we're going to draw 2 little circles as eyes. And now we're going to draw a pointed nose, and automatically you're going to be like, oh my gosh, we're building a snowman. But you're taking them on that journey with you, and you're putting structure and logic to your visual. So when you have white space in a slide, and I'm going to show you an example, when you have white space, it really allows you to be able to A, get excited about the content, and then B, be able to actually digest what's in there and then follow along with that presenter. So what you're seeing here, I can almost guarantee you that you probably saw the first white space is your friend first. And then immediately your eyes then draw over to the color to read through the 3 bullets. And then all I did was give you that canvas to digest the first part of content to then drive you to my next key messages. versus we often bombard our slides down.
Yeah, I will agree. That's exactly where my eyes went. So
Yeah.
I concur.
And it's definitely not how I traditionally have built my slides. So like just those small kind of psychological things that they're simple once you explain it. But if I didn't know that and I was building a slide, I probably would not build it with white space in mind.
Yeah.
So
and I think too, like building, like this doesn't come naturally for a lot of people. And I often joke that your probably grade 12 English teacher cursed you from being able to create good presentations, because we are taught to use filler words all the time. We're taught to use full sentences all the time. That is a very natural way of writing. People can follow along from a storytelling perspective. But a presentation, as we kind of going back to the very beginning of our conversation, a presentation is meant to complement. So if you're putting in filler words, which sales reps are really guilty for that. And the other thing sales reps are really guilty for is big words, big words that are way too long for the average literacy of a reader. And we have to remember that everybody likes simple. Everybody likes easy. Nobody will ever give you crap for creating a simple and easy to understand, as sophisticated as you want to the topic. But for somebody to be able to easily digest it right from the beginning with honestly like grade 5 level writing is the way we should set presentations. So when we get those big high school filler words, stuff that you have to look up a thesaurus to understand what the other meanings of words are, it's too much for somebody to be able to digest.
That's funny. There was I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about like the greatest songs ever written. And I forget what the website is, but you basically take the lyrics of the song, you submit it, then it tells you what literacy level it is. And I think they said it's basically like between grade 5 and 7. So all of like the best songs that too, they have a literacy level of like grade 5 and 7. And so as people are writing all these songs in Nashville, they'll submit them and start seeing where they come out, because they'd have the highest odds of it being this like great hit if it falls into that. And some of like the songs that people say are the worst songs they've ever listened to have like a very high literacy level, and people just aren't connecting with it. Right. So
it's crazy because stuff. You know, I came from the financial services space, and our average grade level, and we were trying to get it way down, but the average grade level that people wrote at was grade 22. So that's like master's degree level. And so if you think about the average person, their financial literacy levels are at like grade 3. Like it's very, very low. And so I would say that SAS is probably pretty similar. The way we write is probably at a much higher grade level than people need us to be able to digest it right off the bat. Doesn't mean we're not going to get there. But from the first, you know, I'd say the first 2 to 3 presentations you're giving with a client, you want to be able to, for lack of better words, dumb it down for them.
I think that
so I know you've touched on it a couple times.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Riva.
Well, I was going to say that connects to the whole concept of like, I think there's a little bit of a delay with my internet, so I apologize. I think it connects too with like, we always say, if you really understand something, you can simplify it. And so it might be a matter of, do you understand what you're solving for your customer? Do you understand your product? And if you don't, then maybe you're going to have a really hard time creating a presentation that's simple and to the point. So it's kind of an interesting connection.
I was going to say the other part to that too. And well, this is another question I want to ask around is like the art of simplifying something, right? Often can be told through story. Right. And being able to draw parallels from something that may not be your product or your offering into more of like a real world day-to-day activity, right, is a way for people then to understand it. And okay, that clicks. You know, for you and what you've seen, like what's important when it comes to storytelling, whether it's with just sales reps or individuals as a whole?
Yeah, it's a great question, because stories in any type of presentation can be incredibly powerful, but it can also be the demise for a lot of sales reps. And the reason why I say that is everyone tends to, I'm going to back up. Everyone tends to be more left brain or right brain. So left brain is a little bit more logical, likes facts, direction. Right brain is your creative, imaginative people, right? Most people don't sit in the middle. They're definitely one side over the other. A story is very creative and imaginative. So it's very right brain heavy. Now, for somebody in your audience that's very left brain, which is 50% of the population still, they need good structure and good logic to be able to make sense of your story. So stories can be really, really powerful if, when you're setting your story up, you're able to say something as basic like, hey, Jimmy, I have a good story for you. It'll be super quick, I promise, 30, 45 seconds, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about how my client, blah, 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 hit ABC, go into the story. And then all I did now was connect my left brain people. I have a story. Here's how much time it's going to take me. And here is the structure of it. And then I go into my storytelling, and my story might be all over the place, but that's fine. My right brain people are going to appreciate that, but I've at least connected the two sides of the brain together. So I find that they can be so powerful if you just sometimes simply set up your story to allow your audience to be able to connect with it. I don't know if that's the answer you were looking for, but.
It is definitely and I think that's what, you know, we're asking around, right? Because a big part of a sales rep's job is to understand how their product is impacting other companies, because really what you're trying to do is get anyone that you talk to be as successful as someone else you know has been successful doing it, and you want them to do that, but it's oftentimes comes across as not authentic, because it's like, I'm going to give you every single stat that they were able to accomplish, even though maybe only one of those stats is what we're actually talking about, but I'm adding these other ones because it's just like, come on, go check that out. I'm going to tell you this, right? So I think it's important for people to know. And I'm very much right-sided, and as Reva can probably tell based on all of our conversations, you know, stats and organization is not something that I typically pay attention to. So I love that point about connecting both to get them ready. Because I know when I do tell a story, oftentimes there really is no end to it, and it doesn't really go anywhere.
People are like, Jimmy, I wish you would tell me how long this story is going to be, because I can't follow
Let me tell you
along.
a quick story. 45 minutes. I'm going to tell you how a customer, it's not even really a customer, it's just what I ended up doing yesterday. So hopefully you're into it.
I love this like little simple thing to keep in mind, because I feel like I'm going to remember this the next time I want to tell a story, even on a discovery call or something like that. But it's like, it's the same way you start a conversation, right? And it's like setting expectations of, this is what we're going to cover today, and this is what the purpose of this call is for. And when you do that, you sort of put people at ease, where they're like, okay, yes, my agenda items are covered in there. I know what to expect. I know when this is going to wrap up. Now I can relax and really engage. But if you jump into a story and someone's like, oh, I just had a question I wanted to ask, and now I'm listening for 2 minutes to this stupid story.
That's exactly it. Like sometimes people think, like, you start telling a story and your story might only be a minute, but you have a really powerful ending that's going to connect the dots for them. If you don't tell them right from the beginning that this story has power to it, they're probably going to tune you out, right? Like it's I'm really guilty. I talk for a long time. I tell a lot of stories. This, I personally had to start adapting, because I could sense, especially over video, where people were like, la la land, once I started telling stories. So for me, it was like, I'm going to tell you a story. I promise it has a point to it. And the point is important for our conversation. So just bear with me. Like, you can add humor to it, being like, I'm the worst storyteller. Like, ask my partner. He gets sick and tired of hearing my stories. Make humor around it, but then it's going to lighten them. It's going to allow them to listen, lean in, and engage, and then know that a point is coming to the end of the story.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think actually that kind of like sparks a question I have about telling someone's kind of tuning out visually. This would happen in person too, but do you have any tips for if you're presenting and you're noticing that the body language of people, maybe they're not like picking up what you're putting down? Like, any tips on how to read body language?
Yeah, I mean, so I've always been taught, there's an acronym I feel like a teacher. I'm just throwing stories and crap at you guys. There's an acronym that I learned when I used to play sports, and it's called SLANT. SLANT is sit up straight, lean forward, ask questions, nod if you're agreeing or don't agree, and then track your speaker. A little bit different in from a video setting, but you can tell if one of your audience is doing 3 out of the 5 things, sitting up, leaning forward, either nodding or asking questions, or they're watching you, they're engaged. So it's that's why I use that rule of thumb a lot. Like if it's 3 out of 5 times they're engaging with me, if they're not doing any of those, you better get off that topic and move on to something that they're going to engage with. So it's pretty, again, it's not the easiest acronym, but SLANT, sit up, lean forward, ask questions, nod, track your speaker. It's a pretty easy way to be able to read somebody's body language right off the bat, if they're engaged with you or not, right? People like Jimmy's like leaning in right now.
What if I was like,
if I could see, or you can see when somebody fidgets. So if I'm like trying to readjust when you're talking, they're uncomfortable. They want you to move off your topic. And sometimes it's as easy as, again, I may be a little bit too transparent. I'll be like, okay, I know that was a long spiel. Like, let's recap, let's move back, let's go forward. Tell me where you want to go with this direction. Like put the onus back on them. And I'll do that even in small settings, in like boardroom settings. You start to see people shift. I'll straight up say like, okay, I know this is uncomfortable, or I know this isn't the best topic. So can you bear with me for 2 more minutes? Automatically, you'll get their engagement back sometimes. A little different in video, but you can still see if they're engaging or not.
yeah, that's interesting. I'm trying to think back of like team meetings and everyone's just like, is this a telltale sign?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's another kind of skill set. Okay, so like presentations alone and being a good presenter, that's one thing. But then reading a room and also being able to in real time figure out what you're going to do when you see something's getting derailed. That could even be if you're like in the SaaS space, you've got your SC who's doing a demo, and you're there and you're reading the room of like 8 people. Mm-hmm. And if you notice something's kind of going off the rails, how do you take, because that is your job, right? You can't just passively sit by and be like, this is not going well anymore. You got to like do something about it.
Yeah. And I think, in that's a perfect instance. Virtual, doing a demonstration, a bunch of people sitting on the phone, you can see that half the people aren't engaging. Humor works wonderfully. And I know not everybody has the confidence to be able to jump in and kind of like tell some joke to re-engage. It can be as simple as saying like, hey, I noticed that there's a bunch of you that are on other monitors, and I've called people out before. You can do it a really nice way, but like, hey, I noticed we're not like crazy actively engaged here. Is there something that we can show you that's really important for you that we haven't hit yet? Mm-hmm. Turn it back on them. And trust me, as soon as somebody calls you out in a meeting, and Jimmy's done this to us, right? They call you out, they see that you're not engaging, it forces you to turn back your attention, because nobody genuinely wants to be, I shouldn't say nobody. Most people don't want to be rude. Like most people do want to engage. People are just busy now. Yeah.
Jimmy, what would you do? Have you ever kind of brought what is your kind of go-to method if you notice a meeting is not an internal one with your sales reps, but have you ever like...
Hey, everyone's mute button is on. Can someone talk, please, other than me? No, I think there's a couple of, and like the SC example is a great example, right? Because I think that we talked, it may have been with Zach Lipton, we talked to him with Sales Loft about what some of the good sales, like the best sales reps that he works with do, mm-hmm. That's maybe some of the junior ones aren't doing. And part of it is owning the call and understanding that even though he would be running a demo and going through something, part of my job would be, and I understand that as a sales rep, is to understand what's going on within the room. If I see a lot of people are being disengaged, I can easily make a joke and say, hey, like that's let's stop talking maybe a little so much about APIs, because those are super exciting, but I know we've got, and bring us back to the roadmap that we laid out together. I mean, everything's going to be situational, and I feel like you don't really want to call people out on the call. You just want to bring attention to the fact that we're coming to a conclusion of whatever it is that we're doing.
Mhm.
And so then people, like Tori said, people will be then, okay, I see a light at the end of this API tunnel. Thank goodness. Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, another easy way too is, especially with like Zoom and virtual meetings, there's the ability to chat directly with people. So I was sitting on one a couple weeks ago, and I could sense major confusion on this person's face. I just, in the chat function, directly sent them a chat and to say like, hey, did that make sense? Can I clarify something? And they actually chatted me back, and then I sent them an article that answered their question. They were like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Like, this is really helpful. So sometimes there's that ability too. I mean, that's a little bit of an offside topic, but being virtual, I think there is still benefits to being able to engage too.
for sure.
Yeah, you'd never be able to text someone in a boardroom.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Sure.
Yeah.
We were on a call. It's funny, and I'll bring up a story. And I promise this is going to be less than 2 minutes, and you're going to enjoy it. But we were on a call, and as we were going through it, they were all kind of like typing and looking at their monitor. No, we didn't end up saying anything. They called themselves out and be like, "Listen, we're not trying to be rude. We're literally just texting back and forth because what we're seeing is so exciting that you guys actually have this type of post-sale thing put together, and that means we don't have to do it, because typically when we work with vendors, 90% of what you've done is what we would have to do, and you've already done it. So we're not trying to be rude. We're doing it. So like I said, under 2 minute story, but you know, it's great to see. And we obviously didn't have to call them out. They came clean and said, this is exactly what we're doing. So just don't think we're being rude, which is cool. On the topic of virtual meetings, and especially for you, Tori, I'm assuming like a lot of what you guys would have done was a lot more face-to-face, right? You know, what are some of the tips that you can provide all of the stage crashers, Baker's dozen of them, all Baker's dozen, I think we're at, right? What are some of the tips that you can provide them? I mean, there's been a lot of tips actually that you've talked about that they could implement, but is there anything that sticks out on, maybe things that you've seen because you've now moved into the SaaS world, slightly different than what you're doing, but probably see a lot of the bad habits that could come with maybe starting out your career virtual and not having that uncomfortable feeling of sitting down with someone in a room that you've never met before, having to break the ice and win them over as a friend, right? What are maybe some of the tips that you would have that, or maybe that you've observed?
Yeah, no, that's a really great questions. There's a couple in there, and I think maybe I'll dissect it by starting where we started the conversation. First and foremost, like when you're putting a virtual presentation together, whether it's virtual or in person, like you have to remember you're the presentation. So there's got to be that level of confidence when you're putting the content together that you can deliver that content. I think that's a really big mistake across the board, not just SaaS, that you rely on your presentation to fill your knowledge gaps. And I'll be the first one to say that, being new to SaaS, coming from the financial services industry, I will not be relying on slides that unless I can speak to them in a pre-educated way. And that comes with work. So I think that's the first and foremost, is like you're the presentation. I think the second one, when you're first starting to build a virtual presentation, don't be afraid to build a very detailed one. Like I always have 2 takes. My first take is like my brain dump, my 7 points on a slide, full sentences. Like sometimes I'll actually create a presentation as if I'm doing my grade 12 essay format. Intro, tell them what you're going to tell them. Point 1, point 2, point 3, recap. And I'll actually build my presentation like that, and I might just be typing away. As I'm doing that, I will then make sure I have my structure. Yep, good, makes sense. This is a great flow for how I want to present it. Then I take my second version, which my second version is going to be my version I'm actually going to present. So I kind of call it your first creation or your first draft / potentially your leave behind. You could send that to the client. Then your presentation version. And your presentation version, you are going to slash and cut and critique, and 3 bullets, 3 messages, less words, only visuals that you need. And it becomes very easy, because what I do, on 2 monitors, busy version, ugly version. Okay, 7 points, Tori. What is the top 3? Maybe what's the top 3 words you want them to take out of all of this? engagement, humanization, personalization, whatever those 3 words are. I might have a 7-minute story or slide that I'm going to talk to you about that, but I'm going to put those 3 words up, because if they don't remember a single damn thing that I say to them in that 7 minutes, they're going to remember my top 3 points. And so sometimes what I'll do, and I've done this as a crutch, I will show them the pretty version, and then I have my ugly version on my screen where my camera is, and that's my script as I'm following through. So it looks like I'm super engaged and I'm following along, and all I'm doing is when I progress here, I'm making sure I progress here, and I practice doing that. And all of a sudden it looks like I'm so well versed. So that's, I mean, a little bit of a crutch for people that aren't as comfortable in their presentation space, but it's a really, really easy tip to create your ugly, really bad version, and then do a complete cleanup and like really just your couple messages.
And those are awesome points.
Yeah.
And it just made me think back, and when I first started, I think, and Reva, we started around the same time, and it was so common, to be doing discovery calls over the phone. And I don't think that's uncommon anywhere, but I think about it now, and like, I think people were afraid to be on video when it kind of came out. I think it would be so awkward doing a discovery call on a telephone, not knowing what other than maybe what I've seen their face look like on LinkedIn. I would have no idea that kind of food. Like, it's so much nicer being able to at least put a face to a name. It feels, for the most part, like I'm having a conversation, although aliens would be like, why are these people just talking into computers? They're so weird, right? Right, but it's neat to kind of hear some of Tori's points, because I think a lot of us have kind of gone through that, especially as you're starting out. It's like, what's a Marketo? Right.
Yeah, or even just like the simple, like, put that where your camera is, set it up so that you have your notes, like do a dry run so that when you do it in real life, you feel comfortable. Like, these are just things that you just need to put a bit more time up front. Don't just jump onto your meeting and be like, open your slide deck for the first time that day and go do like your dry run live.
Yeah. And I think like the easiest tips for anybody to incorporate right off the bat, because it definitely doesn't happen overnight to feel comfortable with being able to slash your content, because you're like, no, they have to know those 7 points. So if you're uncomfortable, there's like the easiest tips ever is to use bold colors and change the fonts. It's crazy. I often joke as a kid, if you remember, your teacher would be like, make sure you have a highlighter and a red pen. The reason why they did that is because they want you to write in red pen or highlight the most important points. So all the other crap that you're writing as you're studying in high school, whatever is red and bold, that's what you need to remember, and that's what you go back to. Same thing with presentation. So it's very funny that it's like, again, high school, elementary tips. And then deleting those filler words. And then I always try, every bullet is less than 10 words. I honestly aim for 4 to 5 words where I can, even if it doesn't make sense sometimes. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Well, I know based on time, we've got a couple of questions that we wanted to ask as more of fun type stuff.
Okay.
Although this was very educational. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Me too.
Reva, do you want to ask the questions?
Yeah, I do.
feel like I've been hogging all the questions. I always do. I'm such a hog. So you do it.
Okay. I'm gonna take a tip from Tori. Bring my notes right here.
See,
And now I have all 5 of these questions memorized, do you think? Okay, so the first question, these are probably the hardest ones you'll have to answer through this whole episode. What are your thoughts on pineapple on pizza?
Nope. Stay in the fridge. Pineapple is for the morning. It's not even an afternoon snack.
What are your thoughts, Jimmy? Do you like pineapple on your pizza?
Love it. I love it.
Oh, you would. I knew that. I could see.
I don't want to strongly disagree. I'll disagree only because like I don't like it every time, but every once in a while, like you see like a Hawaiian pizza and you're like, Lord have mercy.
Sweet and savory.
This looks so
it's
some like nice ham and then throw bacon on it too. Like
too squishy.
Luckily it's
squishy.
Friday. Yeah, too squishy, too pickly.
Texture is very important on pizza.
That's true. Actually, no one's brought the texture concept up to me about why they don't like pineapple on pizza. So okay, I could get behind that one.
Yeah.
All right. If animals could talk, which animal would be the jokester?
Oh, Ooh, not my dog, that is for sure. I would probably say monkeys, just because they're constantly like around your shoulders, tapping on you. I had a friend like that in high school. Every time they walked by you, they did the opposite shoulder tap, and you're like, it's not funny.
Okay, perfect. And then which animal would go and talk to the manager every time you went out for dinner with them?
A cat, 100%.
Yes.
Sneaky.
Yes. And just like miserable creatures a
Yeah.
little bit. Sorry for the cat lovers.
Not a cat person.
Okay, what would be the worst buy one, get one free sale of all time?
Ooh, I love them, but probably onion. I'm a big stickler for bad breath. Like there's no excuses to have bad breath nowadays. So anything onion or garlic would be probably the worst sale ever.
And then the last one, if you earned $500 for being on the show, disclaimer, you will not, and had 2 minutes to spend it on anything, what would you buy?
Probably Nespresso pods, because they're the most expensive things in the entire world, but it's a very large addiction.
That's a good one.
I think they call them liquid gold. They're so expensive.
They're so
All right.
crazy.
Well, we are right at the top of the hour, so that is all the time we have. This was so educational, so informative, and I love that it was simple enough that it's going to stick in my brain. And I'm like really excited to just try and get better at presentations now because of Tori's tips.
Oh, Tori's tips. I see a
Tori's
weekly segment
tips, I
coming
like
up.
that.
There we go. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We hope this was helpful for you, and we can't wait to see you in our next episode.
Cheers.